There is a kind of heartbreak that does not happen loudly. It does not always arrive with screaming arguments, dramatic endings, or doors slamming shut. Sometimes it happens in silence. Sometimes it happens when someone who gave everything simply stops giving. Sometimes it happens when the person who was always there, always understanding, always patient, finally walks away and does not come back. And for someone who lives behind emotional walls, that kind of loss can hit harder than anything else. Most people misunderstand what happens when an emotionally distant person loses someone deeply loving. They assume the one who pulled away feels relief. They assume freedom returns. They assume detachment makes the ending easier. But the truth is often far more complicated. Because distance can protect a person from closeness in the moment, but it cannot protect them from the emptiness that comes after. It cannot shield them from the realization that the one person who saw through their defenses is now gone. There are people who know how to love with softness. They know how to listen beyond words. They notice pain hidden behind silence. They sense sadness beneath cold behavior. They offer care even when it is not asked for. They stay patient in situations where many others would leave. They bring warmth into spaces where emotional coldness has lived for years. And when someone like that enters the life of a person who struggles with intimacy, something powerful begins to happen. At first it feels confusing. Someone emotionally guarded may not know why they feel calmer around this person. They may not understand why conversations feel easier, why their nervous system relaxes, why they feel seen without needing to explain themselves. They may even resist it. But beneath that resistance is something they rarely admit. They feel safe. That safety matters more than they know. Because some people become distant, not because they do not care, but because caring once felt dangerous, vulnerability once led to disappointment, trust once led to pain, need once led to rejection. So they learned to survive by depending on no one. They learned to stay self-contained. They learned to appear unaffected. Over time, this becomes an identity. Independence becomes armor. Silence becomes control. Emotional space becomes comfort. Then someone loving arrives and gently challenges all of it, not by force, not through pressure, but through consistency, through kindness that does not demand repayment, through patience that does not shame hesitation, through presence that does not disappear the moment things get difficult. And slowly the guarded person begins to experience something unfamiliar. They begin to feel what it is like to be cared for without conditions. This is where the hidden bond forms. From the outside, it may look unbalanced. One person expressing more, one person holding back, one person leaning in, one person retreating. But beneath the surface, a deep imprint is being created. The loving person becomes associated with peace, with softness, with emotional refuge, with a kind of acceptance the guarded person may have rarely known. And that is why losing them becomes so devastating. Because you do not always recognize the value of light while you are standing in it. Sometimes, you only understand what it was after darkness returns. In the beginning, emotionally distant people are often drawn to deeply caring souls without even realizing why. They may say it is attraction, they may call it chemistry, they may describe it as comfort, curiosity, or ease, but what they are often feeling is the pull of something their inner world has been missing for a long time. Warmth. There is something disarming about a person who leads with empathy. They do not just hear words, they hear tone. They do not just see behavior, they sense emotion. They understand hesitation. They notice shifts in energy. They know when someone is pretending to be okay. And because of this, they often respond with gentleness rather than judgment. For someone used to being misunderstood, this can feel life-changing. Imagine spending years believing no one truly gets you. Imagine feeling that closeness always comes with pressure, demands, or disappointment. Then suddenly someone enters your life who asks for honesty, but offers safety. Someone who sees your distance and does not instantly condemn it. Someone who notices your contradictions and still chooses compassion. That kind of presence can feel magnetic. Even if the guarded person cannot explain it, they feel pulled closer. They start sharing pieces of themselves they do not usually reveal. They begin texting more, staying longer, smiling more freely, letting their walls lower in moments they do not fully understand. And for a while it can seem like healing is happening naturally. But healing and comfort are not always the same thing. Sometimes a person can enjoy closeness while still fearing it. They can crave love while distrusting it. They can want connection while being triggered by the vulnerability it requires. And this creates the painful contradiction that defines so many relationships like this. The more they care, the more exposed they feel. The more exposed they feel, the more distance they create. So just when the loving person feels progress, the retreat begins. Messages slow down, energy shifts. Warmth becomes inconsistency, openness becomes silence. The person who once leaned in now pulls back without explanation, and the loving heart on the other side often blames themselves, not realizing the withdrawal was never about their worth, it was about the other person's fear. Still, during the closeness phase, something important happened. The emotionally distant person tasted a kind of connection that reached deeper than surface attraction. They felt emotional shelter. They experienced being understood. They were cared for in ways they may never have known how to request. And those experiences do not disappear just because they withdraw. This is why they often think about the loving person long after they create distance, because despite all their avoidance, a part of them knows something rare was offered. Many emotionally distant people do not realize how much they depend on a caring presence until it is gone. While the relationship exists, they may act casual. They may seem unaffected. They may downplay the importance of the connection. They may focus on flaws, ask for space, or insist they need less than they actually do. But emotional dependence does not always look like obvious need. Sometimes it looks like sleeping better because one person exists. Sometimes it looks like feeling calmer after one conversation. Sometimes it looks like carrying less stress because someone keeps bringing peace into your life. Sometimes it looks like knowing there is one person in the world who understands your silence. These comforts become invisible when they are constant. The loving person becomes part of the emotional environment. Their reassurance becomes normal. Their patience becomes expected. Their forgiveness becomes assumed. Their care becomes background music, always there, often unnoticed. Until one day it stops. Then the room changes. Then mornings feel colder. Then distractions stop working the same way. Then victories feel emptier because there is no one meaningful to tell. Then stress feels heavier because the one calming voice is absent. Then loneliness arrives, not as dramatic pain, but as 1,000 tiny absences. That is when the realization begins, not always immediately, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months later, sometimes only after failed attempts to replace what was lost with shallow connections. But eventually, many guarded hearts confront the truth. The person they took for granted was carrying emotional weight they never acknowledged. The person who listened when no one else noticed. The person who stayed gentle during confusion. The person who offered love without trying to control. The person who brought softness into a life built on defense. And once that awareness begins, regret can grow quietly. Because it is one thing to lose attention, it is another thing to lose genuine care. Deeply loving people often bring a kind of emotional richness into relationships that is hard to describe until it is gone. They do not just love through words, they love through details, through remembering what matters to you, through sensing your mood before you speak, through giving reassurance when pride prevents you from asking, through celebrating your wins as if they were their own, through holding space for your pain without making it about themselves. They create emotional home, not perfection, not fantasy. Home, the place where you can exhale, the place where you can be messy, the place where your silence is not feared, the place where your tenderness is safe. People who struggle with closeness often want this more than anyone, but they also fear it the most. Because once you know what home feels like, losing it becomes terrifying. And to avoid that future pain, some people sabotage the very love they need. They question sincerity. They focus on imperfections. They create distance after intimacy. They convince themselves they need less than they do. They mistake numbness for strength. But none of these strategies erase the bond formed with someone who loved deeply. They only delay the grief, and grief delayed can become grief intensified. That is why losing someone deeply caring can hit an emotionally distant person harder than many expect. Not because they suddenly become different overnight, not because they always come running back dramatically, but because inside, often in private, they begin to feel the weight of what was lost, the steady presence, the unconditional softness, the patience they may never receive the same way again. The rare person who loved beneath the surface, If you have ever been the one who gave deeply and felt unseen, understand this: many truths are realized too late. Some people do not know the value of emotional safety until they are alone with the absence of it. Some people do not understand love while receiving it, only after losing access to it. And if you were that source of warmth, your impact may be far greater than you were ever shown. Because sometimes the deepest mark left on a guarded heart is not made by the person who chased hardest, demanded most, or stayed longest. Sometimes it is made by the person who loved sincerely, and then finally walked away. And that is where the story turns. Because the moment a deeply loving person finally stops reaching, something shifts inside the one who always believed distance would protect them. For so long they assumed there would always be another chance, another message left unread but waiting, another conversation available whenever loneliness became uncomfortable, another heart willing to understand behavior that even they themselves could not explain. They believed patience was permanent. They believed forgiveness had no ending. They believed love would keep bending itself around their walls forever. But when someone who has given everything finally becomes tired, the silence they leave behind feels different from any silence before it. It is not a temporary pause. It is not emotional protest. It is not a tactic designed to gain attention. It is the quiet of someone who has reached the edge of their own pain and chosen themselves at last. That kind of silence is powerful because it carries no begging, no anger, no performance, no desperation, only absence, and absence can say what words never could. The deeply loving person rarely leaves suddenly. Long before they walk away physically, they have often been grieving emotionally in private. They have spent nights trying to understand mixed signals. They have replayed conversations searching for meaning. They have excused cold behavior because they saw hidden wounds underneath it. They have given second chances, third chances, endless chances, believing that enough patience would eventually create safety. But love cannot heal someone who refuses to meet it halfway. At some point, exhaustion replaces hope. The one who once responded instantly now pauses. The one who once explained everything now grows quiet. The one who once chased clarity now stops asking questions. The one who once carried the connection alone finally sets it down. And often, the emotionally distant person does not notice at first, because they are used to emotional labor happening invisibly. They are used to someone maintaining warmth while they manage discomfort through withdrawal. They are used to returning after space and finding the door still open. So when the energy changes, they may mistake it for mood. They may assume the loving person will bounce back. They may think a little more time will reset everything. But this time it does not. This time the warmth is gone. This time the softness has boundaries. This time the person they counted on has chosen peace over confusion. And that is when panic often begins quietly. Not always as obvious tears, not always dramatic declarations. Sometimes it begins as restlessness, a strange emptiness during moments that once felt normal, the urge to check a phone more often, irritation that distractions no longer satisfy, a growing discomfort they cannot name, because for the first time they are meeting life without the emotional cushion they never properly appreciated. This is the silent damage many never see. Emotionally distant people often underestimate how deeply their inconsistency wounds someone who truly cared. They may think space is harmless because it comforts them. They may assume silence is neutral because it helps them regulate. They may believe avoiding difficult conversations prevents conflict. But avoidance does not erase pain, it transfers it. Every unanswered message teaches uncertainty. Every warm moment followed by cold distance creates confusion. Every refusal to communicate turns love into self-doubt for the other person, and the caring soul often absorbs all of it quietly. They blame themselves, they wonder if they asked for too much, they shrink their needs to keep peace, they become more patient while receiving less, they offer understanding where accountability was needed, because when you love deeply, you sometimes try to heal what is hurting you. Yet wounds ignored do not disappear, they accumulate. The loving person may smile in conversations while crying alone later. They may reassure others while feeling emotionally starved themselves. They may keep believing in potential while reality slowly breaks their heart, and the emotionally distant person often does not grasp the cost because the caring person hides it well. They continue being kind, they continue showing up, they continue giving grace, so the one causing pain assumes pain is minimal. This is one of the great tragedies of these connections. The stronger someone loves, the easier it becomes to underestimate how much they are suffering. Then comes the breaking point. It is rarely loud. It is usually sacred. One day the caring person wakes up and realizes they can no longer abandon themselves in order to stay connected to someone else. They realize empathy without reciprocity becomes self-erasure. They understand patience without progress becomes prison. They see that hoping for someone's potential has kept them trapped in someone's patterns, and something inside them changes. They stop trying to prove their worth. They stop translating silence into hidden love. They stop romanticizing inconsistency. They stop making excuses for what keeps hurting them. They stop rescuing someone who will not participate in their own healing. This transformation can look calm from the outside, but inside it is revolutionary, because the person who once poured energy outward now begins pouring it inward. They rest, they reflect, they cry honestly. They reclaim routines neglected while obsessing over the relationship. They reconnect with people who love them clearly. They remember who they were before confusion became normal, and as they rise they become less reachable to the dynamic that once drained them. This is when losing them feels different. Many people can be replaced socially. Attention can be found elsewhere. Flirting can be repeated. Surface companionship is everywhere. But genuine emotional sanctuary is rare. The person who brought understanding without judgment, softness without weakness, loyalty without control, that presence is not easy to replicate. When it disappears, substitutes feel hollow. Conversations may happen with others, but they lack depth. Affection may be available, but it lacks safety. Attention may return, but it does not soothe. Because once someone has experienced authentic care, imitation becomes obvious. The emotionally distant person may try to move on quickly. They may distract through work, social life, entertainment, or new people. They may insist they are fine. They may tell themselves the connection was not that serious. Yet quiet moments expose truth. A song suddenly reminds them of peace they no longer have. A stressful day makes them miss the one person who knew how to calm them. A personal success feels strangely empty because the person who celebrated sincerely is gone. A lonely evening becomes heavier because no one else feels emotionally familiar. This is the shock of realizing real love is gone. Not idealized love, not fantasy. Real love, the kind that saw flaws and still cared, the kind that remained patient longer than most would, the kind that wanted growth, not control, the kind that made space for vulnerability without demanding perfection. And by the time many emotionally distant people understand what they lost, the loving person is no longer waiting in the same place. Because something else has happened while they were delayed in realization. The caring soul has begun to heal. Healing changes energy. The person who once looked at their phone hoping now looks at life with curiosity again. The person who once felt rejected now feels relieved. The person who once wanted one specific love now wants peace more than anything unstable. And peace is attractive in a way chaos can never be. This is why seeing the loving person move forward can feel devastating. It forces a mirror into the hands of the one who avoided accountability. Suddenly they are not grieving only the person. They are grieving the version of themselves that could have grown if they had chosen courage earlier. Regret often arrives in silence. They replay moments they dismissed, messages they answered coldly, apologies they never gave, tenderness they received but never matched, times they were loved during seasons they were difficult. And memory has a cruel way of highlighting what pride once ignored. But not every story ends with reunion. Sometimes the purpose of the loss is awakening, not reconciliation. Sometimes the loving person was meant to teach through absence what presence could not teach through devotion. Sometimes losing someone kind becomes the first honest consequence a guarded heart has ever faced. And for the viewers who have been the ones loving too hard, hear this clearly. Your care was not wasted because it was not returned equally. Your patience was not foolish because someone lacked readiness. Your softness was not weakness because another person hid from intimacy. You were showing what love looks like. Whether they understood it in time or not is their journey. Your journey begins the moment you stop measuring your worth by someone else's capacity to receive it. Because the day you choose yourself after giving everything is not the day love failed. It is the day love finally included you. And once the loving person begins to heal, a new phase begins inside the one who lost them. It is quieter than most people imagine. There are no grand speeches, no dramatic confessions whispered in the rain, no instant transformation that turns emotional distance into emotional wisdom overnight. Instead, there is silence, and inside that silence, memories start to speak. Because when distractions fade and the noise of everyday life settles down, the mind often returns to what the heart never fully processed. The emotionally distant person who once stayed busy, avoided depth, and outran vulnerability, now finds themselves face to face with moments they thought had passed. The way that person looked at them with sincerity, the patience shown during difficult moods, the calm voice that knew how to soften tension, the warmth that asked for honesty but never demanded perfection. Small memories begin to arrive unexpectedly. Not the dramatic moments, not the arguments, not the final goodbye. The ordinary tenderness, the message asking if they got home safely. The way someone noticed they were upset before they said a word. The laughter in moments they barely appreciated at the time. The comfort of knowing one person understood their silence. These are the memories that haunt the deepest. Because grand moments can be dismissed as intensity. But ordinary love reveals consistency, and consistency is what becomes irreplaceable. Many emotionally distant people discover too late that they were not addicted to excitement. They were attached to safety. They were not drawn only to chemistry. They were nourished by steadiness. They were not overwhelmed by love itself. They were overwhelmed by how much they needed it. That realization can shake a person, especially someone who built their identity around needing no one. For years they may have told themselves independence was enough, that closeness was optional, that emotional self-sufficiency made them strong. But now they are learning something uncomfortable. Strength without connection can become emptiness. This is why rebounds often fail to heal what was lost. After losing someone deeply caring, many people rush toward distraction. New attention feels easier than grief. New conversations feel easier than accountability. New attraction feels easier than introspection, but surface connections cannot replace soul-level care. Someone new may be exciting, but excitement fades. Someone new may be attractive, but attraction alone cannot regulate loneliness. Someone new may admire them, but admiration does not equal understanding, and so they keep searching for relief while carrying an unspoken comparison inside. No one listens the same. No one notices the same. No one feels emotionally familiar the same. No one creates that strange sense of peace they once took for granted. This is when some begin to understand the difference between being wanted and being known. Many people can want you. Few people truly know you. Fewer still know you and choose you with gentleness. That is what was lost. And no rebound can cover that truth for long. The more they try to replace depth with novelty, the more obvious the void becomes. Nights feel noisy but lonely. Social spaces feel full but empty. Attention comes in, but fulfillment does not, because the absence is not physical, it is emotional. It is the missing presence of someone who reached places inside them others never touched. Then begins one of the hardest internal battles they may ever face, ego versus heart. The heart wants to admit the loss mattered. The ego wants to protect pride. The heart says, you miss them. The ego says, stay silent. The heart says, you hurt someone real. The ego says, they'll come back. The heart says, you were loved deeply. The ego says, act unaffected. This conflict can last months, sometimes years, because pride can delay healing long after pain has begun. Many emotionally distant people would rather suffer privately than risk vulnerability publicly. They would rather replay memories alone than send an honest message. They would rather appear unbothered than admit someone changed them. So they carry grief in hidden ways. They check social media quietly. They reread old messages. They think of reaching out, then stop. They imagine conversations that never happen. They wonder if it is too late, and with time, the silence becomes heavier, because silence may protect ego, but it starves the heart. This is why they often miss the loving person more as time passes. At first, distance can feel like relief. Space feels safe. No emotional demands, no uncomfortable conversations, no pressure to open up. But once the nervous system settles, another reality appears. There is no warmth either, no one asking how they really are, no one bringing softness into stressful days, no one seeing through the mask, no one loving them with unusual patience, and humans adapt quickly to comfort. We notice its loss more sharply once it is gone. The first week may feel manageable. The first month may feel distracting, but seasons change, birthdays come, hard days happen, successes arrive, failures hit, lonely nights stretch longer, and suddenly the person they once withdrew from is everywhere in memory. Not because they are obsessed, because they mattered. This delayed grief is common in emotionally distant people. They do not always feel loss at the moment of separation. They feel it when life presents moments that reveal who used to stand beside them. That promotion they would have celebrated with, that family problem they would have understood, that quiet evening they would have made warmer, that anxiety spiral they would have calmed. Loss becomes real through context, and by then, the loving person is often transforming in ways they never expected. Pain, when processed honestly, can become power. The one who once cried over mixed signals begins to see clearly. The one who once questioned their worth begins rebuilding confidence. The one who once waited for crumbs begins refusing confusion. Heartbreak teaches standards when lessons are accepted. So the caring soul starts glowing differently, not because pain never happened, because pain was integrated. They become wiser with their energy, softer with themselves, more selective with access, more radiant because they are no longer leaking life force into uncertainty. This kind of healing is powerful. It changes posture, it changes boundaries, it changes what they tolerate, it changes how they love. And when the emotionally distant person witnesses this growth, whether directly or from afar, it can break something open inside them. Because now they see what they lost more clearly than ever. Not only the old version who begged for understanding, but the evolved version who no longer needs it. They see someone stronger, calmer, fuller, and less reachable. Someone who once would have answered instantly, now moves with discernment. Someone who once over-explained, now values peace. Someone who once waited, now walks forward. This can create intense emotional discomfort, not from jealousy alone, but from consequence. They are forced to confront that love did not disappear because it was weak. It disappeared because it was neglected, and neglected love often returns as regret. There is a painful lesson many learn too late. People who love deeply do not leave because they stopped caring. They leave because caring alone could not sustain what only mutual effort can build. That truth humbles the heart. For the viewers who have been on the giving side, remember this: their delayed pain is not your responsibility. Their awakening is not your assignment. Their regret is not proof you should return. Sometimes people understand your value only after your absence educates them. That does not mean you must re-enter the classroom. You are allowed to keep growing. You are allowed to become unreachable to dynamics that once wounded you. You are allowed to let someone miss you while you finally meet yourself again. Because healing is not about making them feel your loss. Healing is about making sure you never lose yourself that way again. And once regret has had enough time to settle, many emotionally distant people arrive at a crossroads they never expected. For the first time, they are no longer asking how to avoid discomfort. They are asking how they became the source of it. That question alone can change everything. Because real growth does not begin when someone misses you. It begins when they become honest with themselves. There comes a moment for some of them when the distractions stop working, the pride feels empty, and the loneliness becomes too clear to deny. They start recognizing patterns they once blamed on timing, stress, or the other person. They see how they withdrew whenever intimacy deepened. They see how silence replaced communication. They see how fear disguised itself as independence. They see how someone kept loving them while they kept defending themselves from love. And awareness can be painful, especially when it arrives after loss. Because now they understand what happened, but they cannot undo the months of confusion they caused. They cannot erase the nights someone cried because of their inconsistency. They cannot return to the earlier version of the relationship where repair might have been easier. All they can do is face themselves. This is where some people choose healing, not performative change, not temporary guilt, real healing, the kind that requires therapy, reflection, accountability, emotional practice, uncomfortable conversations, and learning how to stay present when vulnerability rises. The kind that asks them to stop seeing closeness as danger and start seeing it as responsibility. But not everyone chooses this path. Some feel regret and still remain unchanged. Some miss deeply and still avoid growth. Some confuse longing with transformation, and this is important to understand. Missing someone does not automatically make a person ready for them. Pain can wake awareness, but awareness must still be followed by action. That is why many viewers struggle when an emotionally distant person comes back, because return can look like love when it may only be loneliness. They may reach out when life becomes hard. They may reconnect when other options disappoint. They may send warm messages when nostalgia peaks. They may promise growth because loss has humbled them. And sometimes those returns are sincere. Sometimes people truly do confront themselves and come back different. But sincerity is not measured by words. It is measured by consistency. Do they communicate when uncomfortable? Do they stay engaged during conflict? Do they take accountability without defensiveness? Do they respect boundaries they once ignored? Do they show evidence of inner work beyond missing you? Do they love in a way that feels safe, not just intense? These are the questions that matter, because the deepest danger for loving people is believing potential more than patterns. And if you once gave everything, you must now learn to trust actions more than apologies. Meanwhile, something equally important is happening on the other side. The caring soul is learning one of the most sacred lessons of their life. Love should never require self-abandonment. For so long they may have mistaken endurance for devotion. They may have believed staying through repeated pain proved the depth of their heart. They may have thought if they loved hard enough, patiently enough, purely enough, they could inspire another person to meet them there. But love is not earned through suffering. Connection is not built by one person carrying two hearts. Healing another person cannot come at the cost of harming yourself. So the empathic soul begins to redefine love entirely. They stop glorifying chaos. They stop chasing emotionally unavailable people because the challenge feels familiar. They stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. They stop over-explaining clear boundaries. They stop treating inconsistency like mystery. They stop offering unlimited access to people with limited effort. And in that shift, their entire life changes. Because once someone who loves deeply learns discernment, they become powerful. They still care. They still feel. They still love with depth, but now they also choose wisely. Now they understand that softness and standards can exist together. Now they know compassion does not require tolerating neglect. Now they realize being understanding does not mean being endlessly available. This transformation can be shocking to those who once knew them, especially the emotionally distant person who expected the old version to remain waiting. They may reach back only to find someone calmer, clearer, stronger. Someone kind, but no longer easily accessible. Someone warm, but no longer willing to live in confusion. Someone loving, but now loving themselves too. And that can hurt more than rejection, because rejection says no, growth says you lost access. There is a profound emotional sting in watching someone you once took for granted become radiant without you. Not because they became better than before, because they became whole. They laugh more freely. They move with peace. They attract healthier energy. They no longer orbit your moods. They no longer measure themselves by your attention. They no longer pause their life waiting for your readiness. And the one who once withdrew is left witnessing what mutual love might have looked like if only they had chosen courage sooner. This is the lesson many learn too late. Genuine love is not common. People who truly see you, care for you, and remain patient through your struggles are not endlessly replaceable. Some connections are rare, some hearts are once-in-a-lifetime teachers, and when neglected, they do not always return in the same form. Sometimes they return only as memory. Sometimes they return only as wisdom. Sometimes they return only as the standard by which all future connections feel shallow. For the viewers who have been mourning someone who could not meet you, hear this carefully. Their inability was never your inadequacy. Their distance was not proof you were hard to love. Their confusion was not your identity. You were encountering someone at war with intimacy, not someone qualified to define your worth. And if they are hurting now, that pain belongs to their lesson. You do not need to shrink your healing so they feel comfortable. You do not need to reopen wounds because someone finally noticed the blood. You do not need to return to old chaos because someone now speaks the language of regret. You are allowed to move forward. You are allowed to let growth be your answer. You are allowed to become the one who got away from what could not hold you properly. Because sometimes the greatest closure is not hearing them explain everything. Sometimes the greatest closure is becoming someone who no longer needs the explanation. And for those emotionally distant hearts who truly choose healing, there is hope too. No one is condemned to remain guarded forever. Patterns can change, fear can soften, walls can come down, But transformation requires humility, responsibility, and sustained effort, not just sorrow, because love does not ask for perfection. It asks for presence, it asks for honesty, it asks for courage, and courage is what many discover only after losing the person who once offered them love without conditions.